Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Sarah Eisen from CNBC, and I'm very excited to be here with you today. And in our prep call, we determined that this was the most important panel here at Davos because these folks run some of the biggest commercial real estate companies in the world, and they are literally building a better future, which is what we're here to talk about here in Davos. So it is my honor and pleasure to introduce our panelists today. We've got Howard Lutnick, who is the Chairman and CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald. He is also the Chairman of Newmark, the commercial real estate company. We've got Natalie Paladicev, and she is the President and CEO of Ivanhoe Cambridge. We've got Hussain Sajwani, who is the Chairman of DAMAC International, and Christian Ulbrich, who is the Global CEO and President of JAL. So thank you guys all for being here. You know, before we talk about doing good in the world, I think we have to talk about this market and how bad it is, right? Natalie, how do you characterize it? We've had rising interest rates, a weakening economy, some post-COVID stuff, like not going back to the office fully. So what is it like out there right now?
You know, I think of this period as being both a blessing and a curse. Curse, I think we could probably elaborate for a long time around that, but it's also a blessing because it's time for us to really roll our sleeves and tackle the real question. Because, you know, I would think about interest rates and inflation as being the icing on the cake. So it's a part of the cake, but the most important thing that we have to tackle with is really the cake itself, which is the structural, fundamental change of the industry. And trying to finally answer the big question, which is what the communities need, what the society need, and how do we be a solution instead of problem to the world as real estate industry. Because, you know, we are a very big carbon issuer. We use a lot of lands. And so we really have to get back to what is very important. And I think that today is the opportunity to really look at that like that. And, you know, together with CDPQ, we define ourselves as being a constructive capital. So I think it's time for us to really not only perform, but also to contribute to progress.
I like how you spin it into an opportunity and to sustainability. But Christian, what is it like out there as rates have risen and we have entered a sort of new economic cycle? What are deals getting done?
Deals are getting done, but to a much lesser extent than they usually get done.
Yeah.
There's still price discovery out there. Depends a little bit which markets you are, but
and you're everywhere. We
are pretty much everywhere. So the US is pretty radical. So transaction volumes went down very significantly, and it continued in December on that journey to price discovery, but also on that journey to agree where interest rates will come to a halt, because that's very relevant, obviously, for the pricing of real estate. And you have pretty much the same picture, not quite as radical in Europe, but we also have really bright spots. I mean, the Middle East is still doing extremely well. India is doing extremely well. So it's not, the world is flat, but it's not as flat in the real estate sector.
Why is the Middle East doing better than some of the countries like in the US and Europe?
In the Middle East, there are a few spots which are doing very well, not the entire Middle East, of course. Dubai has built a beautiful platform, as you know, over the years, and it's a place where people go because of weather, security, safety, taxes, and all other reasons. And I think COVID has helped Dubai tremendously because a lot of people discovered Dubai. Now, I have families and friends from Germany, from Europe, who moved into Dubai and very wealthy, and I ask, why?
Why?
Exactly, I asked his wife. I do not. You've been coming to Dubai for 8-10 years. Why suddenly? She goes, I brought the kids during COVID because one important thing, education was online, so they could bring the kids and spend 6 months in Dubai. And the kids love it. And, you know, the driver for that will be the wife and the kids, you know.
So Florida and Dubai, those are the pandemic
Exactly, and Miami. I mean, we're doing a project in Miami.
You bought the Surfside,
yes,
the Surfside plot,
yeah.
That horrific building collapse.
Yeah. And we're going to develop one of the high-end condos there. And a lot of people, I mean, he can tell you, from New York, from Boston, from California, moving to Miami, okay? Again, because of weather, how the Miami handled the COVID, taxes. And you can say Miami's been there for 40, 50, 60 years. Why now? People sometimes just need a reason or excuse, and they find out. Dubai's been there. But the influx of European coming to Dubai, I'm shocked. I'm amazed. And some very wealthy people, developers, worth $4, $5, $6 billion with businesses in New York and US, Europe. And he says, no problem. I do 40% of my business on Zoom, MS line well connected, my family is safe, weather is nice, and I have very little taxes, if any.
How many buildings do you have in Dubai?
Oh, we have delivered 42,000 apartments so far, but the challenge is we have another 30,000 under development. So that's makes.
So you're doing well. Howard, how's the U.S. market for you?
So the core stress is debt, right? So each time a building has a mortgage come due, and most people were pushing short-term mortgages over the last 3 years. So you got 50% of all debt coming due in the next 3 years. And they're just not going to get proceeds. So someone who had a $100 million loan on a building, when they go to roll that mortgage, they're not getting $100 million because the value has come down because interest rates have gone up. So the real key mover in commercial real estate is financing. And what happened is when interest rates were so low, everyone talks about the last crisis. Remember, the last crisis ultimately was great for real estate because it crushed interest rates, which drove real estate values up.
Not so much right now.
This is the opposite is true. So real estate has price discovery issues, it's got challenges, but it's all about can you find the debt? And what you're going to find is those who can place your debt and find your debt becomes so much more valuable because a year ago, it was nothing. It was easy. So that's the change that's upon us now. That's what's driving price discovery. And that's what's driving change. And so where inflation is, it's not in Asia. It's not the same in India. It's not the same in the Middle East. But it's the same in Europe. It's the same in Amsterdam. It's the same in New York. It's the same in Canada.
And it's high. You guys are all talking about price discovery, which is a euphemism for lower prices, right?
What's it worth?
What are we talking about?
Right,
How much have prices fallen?
Well, if a building was a 5 cap, which meant it was a 5% interest rate on net income, and it goes to a 7 cap, that building drops 35%. 35% in value. That's just math. It's just interest rate math.
Natalie?
If I may, I think that...
No, we like the disagreement, and I love when all the competitors are on together.
I don't think it's all across the board. So I think it's very important. And for once, we see something that we have completely forgotten over the last 10 years, probably. Over the last 10 years, everything had the same value everywhere. So you could invest in a good building in Shanghai or in New York, it would have been almost the same. Now we have to take into consideration risk more and to value risk. And what we do as investor is really the risk-return profile, like the perfect risk-return profile. So it's not just about the return, it's also about the risk, much more. And that's why I think it's very important for us to have the right portfolio and to also assess the right assets. And what we see is that it's very different from one geography to the other. And what you have just listened to through our speeches is pretty clear. But also, depending on the buildings themselves, which is also very different from what we used to see, where almost everything had the same value. And now, depending on the potential amount of capex you would have to do to address the regulation or just to address the needs of the next tenant, or the requirements of the next tenant, then it's going to be
riskier.
More, for me, it's not even a question of value, it's black or white. And then sometimes, even if you are ready to decrease the value, you just have no buyer at all, because you would not find the market. So I think it's not just about the decrease of the value or the increase in cap rates. It's really about this bifurcation that we talk a lot
What's
about.
the riskiest part of the market right now?
I would say the
office?
It's everything which is obsolete. Because, again, we have completely forgotten that. But the main risk in real estate, I think we agree on that, is obsolescence. And that's why we amortize the building, because we want to, fight the obsolescence. And
old offices.
Exactly. So
old
everything
offices.
which is
new,
old,
sexy office, the rents have never been higher. Never been higher.
What's a new sexy office? What does that even mean? Free lunch?
No. A brand new building.
Yeah.
Right? Beautiful brand new building, big glass, one Vanderbilt in New York. There's buildings in Dubai, there's buildings everywhere. The brand new offices, the top 10% are getting all the rent, and everything else suffering.
What's funny is, there's a lot of doom and gloom around office, especially in New York and other urban centers. And here comes this deal, Natalie, for a competitor news organization who shall not be named.
We're not going to quote, so don't worry.
Which the biggest deal you just signed? What, like in December, January?
Yes, exactly.
Tell us about this deal.
My Christmas present from the team. So I was very.
I'm sure a lot of people were jealous on the stage. What is this deal?
No, I think it's what we were talking about. So it's not like all across the board. There's still people who want the right offices to have the right productivity and to deliver the performance they need for their employees, their stakeholders. So we have that. We spend as a whole 90% of our time in a building. So real estate is not going to disappear. So real estate is here forever, but what real estate? Which one? Which characteristics? So I think it's what it's all about. So it's not like gloomy everywhere and everybody's living. And no, again, look outside. We are all in a building today, and look outside. There are definitely less people. So that's why we have been able to do
But the
this
whole
deal.
office concept it needs a rethink, right, Christian? I mean, I remember talking to we'd have commercial real estate CEOs on during COVID on CNBC and say, what's going to happen to offices? Nobody's working in offices. And you guys would all say, well, they're going to come back. The pandemic's going to be over and everybody's going to come back. But that's not really happening to the same extent, is it?
No, not to the
So how do you
same
adjust to the new
And not to the same
normal
extent, but people are coming back, and you will see also within the US, which is lagging the rest of the world with regards to the return to office, that also in the US people will come more back than we have seen the last 2.5 years. But the flexibility will stay, and that's why what Howard is saying is absolutely right. We have these top premium buildings, and they are designed to attract the employees back into the office to create a really 5-star plus environment. And so what's going to happen is that owners of office buildings have to upgrade those buildings in order to compete. And that goes to Natalie's point that
part of the Fox deal? You're renovating the building,
Yes,
right?
of course.
Yeah, so you will have a lot of obsolete buildings at the end of the day, which are not suitable to be upgraded, or it's financially not viable. So we have to repurpose those buildings in some form or fashion, or they will be empty and will be taken down at some point in time.
How much extra office space is there now around the world?
Well, the official vacancy rate is still pretty low because these obsolete office buildings still are under rental contracts.
Right.
Point is
That will
that
come
those
due.
rental contracts will not be renewed.
Right.
And so it's very hard to say everything is finger in the air, but you have, especially in New York, a significant number of obsolete office buildings going forward.
Zombie.
Well, but in the 70s, you need regulation to say, renovate those buildings into lofts, right? We all know loft buildings down. Where did that come from? It came in the 70s. These were dead industrial buildings, and they changed them all to lofts. So they're going to make these residential buildings, but you need the governments, local governments, to change the rules to make it happen, to incent them to do it. Otherwise, they'll just be dead and vacant.
Right. So there's this movement now from local governments to take some of these zombie or empty office buildings and convert them into affordable housing.
Yeah.
Do the economics work for that?
That's still complicated, but we are considering.
Who pays for that, and what happens to your investment?
Regarding affordable housing, which is really the main question around the world in terms of real estate, it's really somewhere, again, we see different version of real estate depending on the countries, but the only common thing that we see really everywhere is housing. So it's not only affordable housing, it's just the supply and demand discrepancy that we see really in every country, every city around the world. And the problem is that there is no just one recipe that we can replicate everywhere to solve the problem. It's really very depending from the local authorities, especially the mayor, who's in charge of that most of the time. And we have to have really, like, sometimes long relationships and conversations with those people to really convince them that it could be a win-win situation. We have this conversation ongoing in New York, so we got to see where it goes.
Do they get it?
I think so. I think, again, everybody needs housing. housing. So we are working on the math. There is one thing that we are going to take into account, which is what we call the green IRR, which is another way to really demonstrate that our performance is not only the usual numbers that we used to use, but also the cost of the regulation regarding carbons, the pricing of carbon. So if you take all those things into account, then it will probably change a little bit the equation. So we will do a part of the job, and then we are expecting that the public sector is going to do their part too.
No, Howard? Not happening?
Look, so you have local governments who want the buildings politically to be more green, and that costs green. That just costs money.
Yes.
So then you're trying to put plumbing in, you're trying to make it low-income housing. These things are ripping against each other. ESG costs a lot of money. Low-income housing is low cost. Who's paying the difference for the politicians? They're going to kill the buildings, and then they need to change to build the buildings for low-income housing. Low-income housing can't be green. It's got to be cheap. And that is deep conflict everywhere in the world. Every government is saying more green, more low-income housing, and you're watching that rip against each other, and it's very difficult.
But it's less risk too. You know, in fact, affordable housing is very low risk, which is maybe counterintuitive for a lot of people, but that's true. So again, when you look at risk return, then you have to really make your math properly.
Hussain, are you in the office space or only residential?
We have some office space, but I give you an example to say his statement. In Dubai, Brookfield built brand new offices. They're renting at 280 dirham square feet. 2 kilometers next to Burj Khalifa, the tallest tower in the world, some old buildings struggling to rent for 80 dirham, 70% less than that price. So people want wow office building. And as you said, because of COVID, more and more companies are moving toward high-end offices with, you know, all the amenities and facilities to attract the people to work there. Otherwise, they'll jump to the next company where they have a better office space.
So while we're on the topic of opportunities and where there's growth, office week, but there are some places you're in data servers, right? You're investing in data servers.
Yeah,
what are the hot parts of the market?
No, yeah, we gone into data centers.
Data centers.
That's building for the hyperscalers, you know. But I think one of the things we have done, which is interesting, but in Dubai being a desert and being a new city, it's allowed to do that. We build 3 communities, each one 50 million square feet. We deliver 2, and a third on his way. And if you go see those community, everything you can think of is there, from artificial beach to, you know, kids' small garden. They play their vegetables and horse riding and jogging and a shopping mall and so. Our focus has been on lifestyle because more and more people living in a smaller space, 100 square meter or 200 square meter, no matter what you say, is a small space. But you give them a lot of other facilities where they can go out and do barbecue and everything, you know, in the community. So, but in the Western world, that's difficult in Europe because of their old cities.
Can't go horseback riding in a New York City apartment building.
But, you know, but in Middle East, we have that luxury. So even in Saudi Arabia, they're doing the same thing. In Abu Dhabi, they're building those community, 5,000-6,000 homes with everything you can think of for the kids to go out and enjoy in the family.
No wonder people are moving.
Not quite the definition of affordable housing.
No, it's the opposite of affordable housing. Where are the opportunities for you? Is industrial, retail? How do we think about the different categories and what's good and what's not?
Every asset class offers opportunity, as we heard about offices, but it's a small proportion. But generally speaking, the whole industrial and logistics sector will continue to strive. As wages are moving up, the relative cost of rent is becoming less important. And so people are, the opportunity to upgrade their industrial sites, to have a better supply chain, better productivity in the building, will kind of create returns which are exceeding the additional rent. So that asset class will continue to strive. Then you have specific spaces like lab space, data warehouses, and those type of things. I mean, the whole life sciences industry is going really strong, and they need specific space. So all these areas are still very strong. And then retail is really interesting because you have a lot of internal migration. For example, within the US, you made that joke about about Florida. But when more people are moving into Florida or more people are moving into Texas, they have retail needs. So despite the fact that retail was a very challenged asset class now for many years, we have pockets in the US where retail is really, really striving.
Yes, but what we can add to that, if I may, Christian, is that it's not just about the big cities like it used to be. You know, us as a big pension fund, we used to be very concentrated in maybe 10 cities around the globe, when today probably 80% of my properties are outside big cities, because industrial is really everywhere, residential is everywhere. So, you know, it's really different in the way we are looking at the market. And again, it's really related to what you said about lifestyle and neighborhood, and really understanding what a district needs, instead of just thinking about asset class like we used to think of, but more really the I would say the global equipment that the community is going to require, which is going to have a pieces of maybe last mile industrial, maybe a pieces of residential, including affordable housing, pieces of student housing. So all those things, it's like the big asset class are subdivided now into different components and spreading over the whole geographies. So that's why we see more opportunities and new opportunities that we didn't look at in the past.
I mean, COVID really changed everything for you guys. The way we eat, I mean, the way we live, the way we shop, the way we go to work. It's really just disrupted the whole
But if you think
business,
about
hasn't
people
it?
going back to work, if people work 3 days a week, they need the same desk that if they were there 3 days a week, 2 days a week, 5 days a week. Same usage criteria. Bosses need to give their employees better work environment. Therefore, they need more space, not less. So we're watching people upgrade their offices and take as much space, strangely, than you would expect. Retail is a great way to see the future, because we all know that retail was so challenged 3-4 years ago. I mean, it was terrible, right?
It's like the death of the mall, the death of the store.
Correct. But what's happened? Landlords repriced it. Now you walk in with a tenant, you get a deal done. So retail is on fire. It's working because people are figuring out how to make it experiential and how to make it work. So
Yeah, but if we go into recession, they're not going to expand their store footprint.
But it's working. It's
Right
where
now.
they need to showroom. They need to get their products out there. Senior housing is doing incredibly well. Student housing, as Natalie pointed out, doing incredibly well. You just have to be really, really smart. And that's what happens in tough environments. Smart people win. And the crowd, you know, you just got to be smarter. Just have to be smarter.
So prices are coming down for buildings. What about residential rents, Christian, which has been a stubbornly high part of inflation that the central bankers are trying to fight? Is that coming down?
Well, it's a bifurcated market. The unregulated market, residential rents are going up, and they're going up across the world. And then you have that regulated market where local governments are trying to keep the rents down. And so that is now a major issue in those markets where you have high regulation, because people are not building anymore. Construction costs are sky high. And so we will see in many countries that they will continue to be underserved on resi space. And so if you are in a flat...
Where? Which countries have the worst regulations?
Pretty much across the whole of Europe.
Yeah.
But also in underserved markets in the US, where...
Even in Canada.
Yeah.
Too much regulation?
No, that's not the question whether it's too much regulation, but regulation, you are trying to protect the middle class, that they can stay in their neighborhoods, which obviously is a good thing. But the downside of that attempt is that then people are not investing into that regulated environment anymore, because it doesn't make any financial sense. And on top of that, the ESG topic, which Howard was alluding to, adds additional costs.
But honestly, Europe has to look at their regulation, their zoning. I mean, we study some market like Germany and others, and the regulation and the zoning are ridiculous. They want low-cost housing. They want more accommodation. They're not willing to give you permit to change anything in the building, to go 2 floors higher or 2 floors lower. It takes them 7 to 10 years. How are you going to solve the problem? They're very rigid. They're very single-minded, and the laws of the 50s are still there.
Christian, don't you have any pull in Europe?
Well, I mean, you have to see that in a balanced way, and I can argue like. Obviously, Hussain is arguing, but I can also argue from a regulator's perspective. It is not nice, when you go to that was always big in the press. Downtown London is dark in the evening because nobody lives there anymore. It's all second homes and whatever. Is that attractive? And so local governments are trying to prevent that. They try to have a healthy kind of mix of people so that people with a normal job can still live in that environment. And that's why they regulate it. So at the end of the day, it's a really challenging issue, but it will need subsidizing, tax breaks, whatsoever, to cut through that we have kind of sustainable rental levels and at the same time new product coming to the market.
I, with all respect, not 100% agreement with you. Because everything they're trying to do, they're trying to take taxpayers' money and then they tax you more. And they tax you more. It's not my country, I don't have interest there, but it's ridiculous. Then all the wealthy people and smart people are going to leave the country. Because you keep taxing and taxing, and your deficit is going up, and your budget is not being able to match. So you come in a city like Berlin or Munich, whichever city, and you allow 6-story. So what's wrong if I allow them? I'm not saying 50s. Allow them 12-story. So they create more supply. All building will be demolished, and you will double the quantity. And you can solve some road problems. They don't want to think out of the box. If I'm 6-story, I don't want to change. Fine, then you're going to suffer.
So you're not investing in Europe?
No.
But Sarah, paradoxically, we talked a lot in the last years about retail. We are talking a lot today about offices, but the big question mark, in fact, in the world is housing. So it's strange because, and I thought a lot about it, and maybe because when it's about retail and when it's about offices is just, I would say, between us, just between ourselves. So it's private to private, and we understand each other. But to solve the housing problem, we are like 3 of us. There is the public, which is involved in that, and that's why it's more complicated because we do not use the same language. So I really think that, in fact, even if everybody talks about offices, and I can tell you, I had a lot of pressure of my own stakeholders around that, but the real question mark for us, and I think the real I don't know if it's a problem or an opportunity, is really residential.
Residential. That's the biggest opportunity for you.
Again, that's the real need of the world. You were
Yeah.
talking about potential of capacity in offices. We are not talking about that at all in residential. So there's definitely much more to do. But again, it takes 3 to tango this time, so it's complicated.
So the C office buildings need to be converted to low-income residential. They need to be converted, but that requires local government attention and probably federal government subsidies, right, to help make it happen. But
good luck. Good luck with that in this environment.
But the change in office is going to create that opportunity at vast scale globally, and that is beneficial when they come to fix it. It will come to fix because they will become eyesores and they will need to be fixed, and that push will come, just not next year, but it's coming. It'll come.
But at least we have the conversation today.
Right, exactly. We're getting stuff done. Hopefully there are a lot of investors streaming into this panel and maybe in our audience as well who are wondering if it's a good investment. They're also, there's been a sort of democratization, like we've seen across many asset classes, toward real estate, tokenization, REITs, private REITs, which only go up apparently. Is all that good? Is that good?
Not
right?
It's great, right? It's great. More money coming in creates the ability to develop, creates the ability to create better product, and creates, remember, real estate houses the economy we are in, right? So if the economy is in a tough space, real estate's in a tough space. When the economy is doing well, real estate's doing well. We are children of the same family. So, the more investors, the more powerful.
Kind of. The economy is doing well, but real estate's not doing that well.
Well, interest rates are going to create a recession. We're all in the same family. It's just all going in the same place. We're not splitting up. It's not this side is good and this side is bad. It's all one pile.
What is good about that, too, is that it adds more transparency, more governance, and I think that it's healthy for the whole industry.
To have retail investors in.
Yes, because
In what way? The tokenization? Do you like that?
anything which is bringing new kind of funding. You know, even the green financing is bringing new interests of new investors and new lenders. So I think that's healthy to be more numerous and to be part of something which is so connected to the real world. So I think that's why I like it pretty much, because again, good governance is a good start to make good things.
If your nephew at holiday dinner asks you if they should buy a token of commercial real estate development, is that a good deal for them right now? Would you say to do that?
First of all, it would depend on the individual development, but I don't think that we need tokens for the real estate industry. There are plenty of ways to invest into real estate. As you already pointed out, they can buy a little share in a REIT and a publicly traded fund or whatsoever.
What about a private REIT? Is that a good investment?
Yeah, why not? I mean,
There's been some turmoil there.
Yeah, in the most recent history, but we have seen that before. We will get out of it. What we shouldn't forget is for 10 years, owners of buildings had a free lunch because interest rates were coming down and values were going up. And so they didn't have to be creative, as Natalie pointed out, what you usually do. They just had to wait, and the buildings were getting more valuable. And that is now taken away. That free lunch is now taken away. As we know, there is no free lunch. And so let's look through into kind of the next 5 years. We will get out of that revaluation, that repricing, and then people who are able to work kind of creatively on buildings will create value. And if you are an investor into those kind of vehicles, you will make money. So I will then tell my nephew, yes, you can invest into that REIT.
You would what kind of REIT would you tell them to buy right now?
Well, I don't want to pick out a specific one, but again, if you are buying up the new price level into a well-managed office REIT in the US, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, they're down 30% or so.
Opportunity funds. So buildings that can't refinance, they go back to the lender. New equity needs to come in. You will see more money raised in opportunity funds in the next 18 months than you've ever seen. And that money's all going to come into the repriced real estate, and they're all going to make money.
Who benefits from that?
If you think about it, if interest rates, whenever they stop, right? It doesn't matter what level they get to. If interest rates get to 7 and then they go to 6 3/4, everybody bought real estate at 7 just made money when it went to 6 3/4. So you want to be the new buyer. People who bought 5 years ago with Christian free lunch, yeah, they have pain. But if you're going to buy tomorrow at the new price, I think you're a winner.
Good time.
You're a winner. And you're going to see more money raised for opportunity and distressed funds than anybody's ever seen. Hundreds of billions of dollars is going to come into real estate, but at the new price level.
What do you tell your investors?
I agree to that, and I think we're looking at the US. They're more open-minded, they're more less regulations, and I am personally against every time there is a problem, everybody runs to the government to bail them out. So give us more money to do this or to take my office because it's in a bad condition to fix it. I think let the market dynamism work, let the market mechanism work. So if you have an office which is C-class, probably somebody has to buy it for $1, demolish it and do something else with it. Don't run to the government. Because the more you run to the government, you're solving a simple problem, but then government's debts, is going to trillions. And you guys are, your kids and grandkids going to pay for that. Okay, so that's being very selfish. I make the money now and my grandkid going to suffer, So I think there is great opportunities in the US, and I agree with him 100%. There will be a lot of funds, which we are investing in some of those funds, that they're going to take those buildings or those assets and refix them. I think the free lunch, which I agree with him, has been going on for 10 years, made the entire market in a different shape. Now it's going to change. So now you have to work harder. You have to take some of those assets and change them. People want better offices. People want better accommodation. I mean, I was in Denmark looking at opportunities 9 months ago. And I asked the broker, the buildings, you have indoor pool? He's looking at me like I'm speaking French. And he says, no, Mr. Sajwani, we don't. So, in Dubai, the cheapest building, the lowest end will have indoor pool.
Why don't they have indoor pools in Denmark?
I don't.
They swim in the Baltics.
So, you know.
They don't have outdoor pools either.
They don't?
So, you know, talking about big gym and reception, indoor pool, and concierge, maybe there is half a dozen buildings in the entire city there, you know, while in Dubai probably is 90%. So they need to change, you know. People today want, you know, service, a big spa, a gym, and all the facilities and amenities, which most of the European cities don't
I just want a
provide.
playroom, a kid's playroom. It's very convenient.
Of course.
They also want green buildings. And you know, obviously it's a priority for, I think, everybody on the stage and everyone here in Davos. But how do you do that if we're in a pre-recessionary period where rates have changed and the market is tough? How do you prioritize something like that?
That's a tough call. I agree. We all want the environment to change, and we want green. And I attended a few sessions and hear a few people talking, but the amount of money has to spend is in trillions.
Yeah.
Okay? And private sector is a private sector. And governments are in a big debt already, most of them. So how that's going to happen, I don't know. It's a nice dream. It's a nice wishful thought. But let's see on the ground who's going to pay the bill.
She's
Now,
gonna pay.
now I would like to contradict.
Okay, please.
Green buildings for ground-up new construction is actually making money because the additional construction costs are minimal, and then you are saving over the life cycle of that building so much energy, and so your running cost, the operating cost of that buildings are very favorable. You will have cheaper refinancing, and you will need less equity for that financing. And so that is a given, and it's working really well. There are hundreds and thousands of examples which JLL can provide. What is the challenge is the repurposing of existing buildings.
Right, that's costly.
That is really expensive, and that is not easy to solve. That goes back to those stranded assets which need to be repurposed. For some of them it will work, for others it won't work, and so somebody has to write them down. And then, as you say,
But I agree with you 100%. I am not disagreement. The new buildings, I agree with you, and the government should push for that, and regulators should push for that, and you can make money in it, okay? And even if you don't make same money, less money, I think regulators should push for that. The challenges and the old assets,
Yes.
you know, and the challenges beyond that, if you're talking, not the subject of this today conference, of the overall environment and how you're going to come from the, you know, the pollution coming from the refineries and oil and gas and so many other industries, and how you're going to be able to afford that. Those are trillions of dollars of bills.
I know this is something you take very seriously.
Sure, because, you know, what I know is that the best building for the planet is the building that you don't build. So we have to do something for the existing
That's
stock.
the headline of the commercial real estate panel.
That's very important. And we can't just get away from that and say, okay, I'm just building new things. But what I'm 100% agree upon what Christian just said. A few years ago, you would have said probably something different, Christian, that it was costly to make new green buildings. And finally, we have found some solutions to, instead of adding things, to just substitute some components of the building to make it immediately green, instead of making like what we did usually and adding again some new things to make it green. So it
Like
was
what?
really like repurposing the whole, the whole chain, the materials, the processes, everything. And now when we talk to an architect, then it's far different. The conversation is far different from what it used to be. So it's where I'm optimistic about the fact that there is a lot of people thinking about it, and including us, on the way we can convert and we can turn into green the brown stock that we have to face. Fortunately, we don't have so much within our portfolio because we are very privileged. We have been very selective in what we have chosen. But if we want to play our part toward the rest of the world, we would have probably to have a specific strategy to turn some brown assets into green. But again, it's not ready yet. That's true. But I'm optimistic if I look backward at what we used to say regarding the new buildings. So it's a lot about tech. It's a lot about materials, which is something which used to be far away from us. We were just dealing with numbers in an Excel sheet, us as investors. And now we have to be closer to the way the buildings are made and to the needs of the customers. So it's where I think the industry has changed so much. It used to be very B2B and very financial, and it's more than that now. So it's where I think it's very refreshing.
Can you afford it? Can you afford to go green?
Well, the Inflation Reduction Act in America gave lots and lots of tax credits and incentives. So now there's windows that tint, right? So they keep the sun out, they keep the heat down, they're very green. If you put them in, it costs 10% less than a regular window. So the incentives can get people to do it, but who's replacing the windows? I mean, you replace your windows every 40 years. So it's got to be a really brown building for you to do it. So it's tough math, but it'll get there, just not fast.
You replace windows every 40 years?
40 years.
Really?
30 years, 40 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to open it up to the audience if anybody has any questions in the few minutes that we have. Yes, please.
I'm curious about your own return to office. What do your offices look like in terms of attendance, and how have your working patterns changed?
Well, so my front end people are all back. So all revenue producers, 5 days a week back at the office, support staff, 3 days a week. Imagine that they get to take off Monday and Friday. Oh, they don't take it off. They work from home. Sorry.
Yeah, you know, we employ more than...
Tell us how you really feel, Howard.
We employ more than 100,000 people across the world, and so we have a pretty good picture about the cultural differences. And I would say, if I really simplify the response, in Asia it's not an issue. In Europe it's about okay. And in the US, it's totally different depending where you are. In San Francisco, Chicago, you can't get people back into the office. In New York, they're all focused to make money. They're back into the office, as Howard is saying. And in Dallas, they're all back into the office. So it has a lot of cultural element to it. And going back to what we said.
Can you tell that story you told the other day where you told that story of they did a survey. Remember the survey? It said, the bosses want everybody back, but they asked the boss, and the boss says he doesn't want to come back.
Is that true?
Well, I don't think it was my story, but I tell a lot of stories. but what is true is you have kind of the top executives, they are all coming back, but you have the middle layer of managers and leaders who enjoy kind of their home in the suburbs, and they don't want to have the commute. And that obviously creates the issue that then the younger folks are also not coming back into the office. But I'm not overly concerned about it. First of all, offices will get much more attractive. Secondly, we have to embrace flexibility with regards to where people work from. But overall, we will see numbers also in the US coming up. It's an outcome of that more recessionary environment. You know, when people have layoffs in their companies, people are kind of motivated to come back and be close to their bosses and demonstrate how important they are, that they're not being laid off. So it will get better.
The bright side of layoffs, I guess.
I don't want to say the bright side, but it's an outcome of it.
Silver lining.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to take that one? Any other questions? Oh, I think we have one here. Hi.
I hear only pessimists here. But isn't it true that inflation and higher interest rates are big friends for higher prices of replacement costs? So there is also another power, and that is inflation and higher interest rates, to protect us that the prices are not going down like that. Because replacement costs are going higher. And of course, location is very important, but I don't like the pessimists here, because I'm sure at long term, everybody who invests in real estate is a happy guy and a happy woman.
Everybody who invests at the right time, right? Entry point is always what matters. If you bought it 5 years ago at a 5% interest rate and interest rates are 7%, you're not a winner, period.
So now's the time. Is now the time?
I said more money is going to come in correctly to the real estate market at the reset levels, at the new price discovery levels, and make money than you've ever seen before. So I agree with you. It just depends on what day you come in. That day is coming now. As interest rates settle down, whenever they stop going up, real estate resets quickly because of the mortgage rates, and then rallies start in real estate. It's just very painful for a short period of time.
We have to define also the definition of investors, because a guy or an investor in real estate who go to the banks and try to get 50, 60, 70% or 80% loan, that's not an investor. That is a speculator. And an investor,
someone with a 60% mortgage is now a speculator.
Somebody who really puts his own money there. And then, okay, the money is a little bit less next year, but it will go up again. But the problem is, and people get stressed and even cancer, because they have stress, they can't pay off the loans. So my advice is, no loans is perhaps too much, but an investor invests his money where he can also take the risk.
Okay, we're out of time, as you can hear, but I have one more question for everyone really quickly, because we didn't talk a lot about technology, and I know you're all thinking about the future. So your last final question to leave us with, so 21, 23, is that 100 years? What do buildings look like?
I will make a very, very short comparison with warehouses. In 10 years from now, 10 years back, warehouses was just a simple building. Now it's full of tech, full of data, full of the most sophisticated things that we can imagine. So I think that office is going to evolve like that. It used to be just premises.
Robots?
It's going to
Robots
be
in offices?
I don't know, many new things that we don't know yet, but definitely just not only walls, floors, and ceilings, but more than that. And I think warehouses is probably a good guidance to where it could be.
100 years. Swimming pools in Europe?
I think I'm more into residentials, and I think residentials will change, and there'll be more demand of, if not 10,000 community, at least 500 apartments with a lot of parks and exclusive area for those residences. People will end up same now living in a small space, but they want a common space where they and their kids and their families can enjoy, and that will be the demand on those areas, I think.
100 years.
Yeah, first of all, I think it's the wrong question. We didn't know on February 20th what would happen on February 24th. So 100 years is a long time.
But you have to be envisioning
buildings
of the future.
I'm trying to respond.
You better have a better view than we do, than I do.
Buildings are a massive source of data, because in large office buildings, hundreds and thousands of people are walking into that building. You see how they move in the building. You see what they're doing in the building. We don't have to wait 100 years but to see that we will take all that data in and learn from that data, create better buildings, better productivity in the buildings. The buildings will be operated fully digitally. And so the real estate industry has been massively behind technology, and now it's catching up at lightning speed. And so we will see buildings being the place of a digital, data-driven environment in 10, 15 years from now, not in 100 years from now.
Modular. It's all going to snap together. You'll be able to put all the technology together. You can run pipes through it. You're just going to bang it out together. The cost is going to relentlessly come down in factories where they're going to integrate it all the technology, all the power, everything. They'll all be solar. They'll all have the proper windows. They'll have reasonable size, reasonable scope. They'll be able to be defined by computers, and they'll bang them out. It's going to be just fundamentally the construction industry will completely change.
There you go. That's what I was looking for, and with the exclamation on the panel. Thank you all very much for taking the time. Thank you.